Well, hello, Micro Giants. Glad to have everybody back here today. Again, we've got the consulting amigos. We've got the full team here today to go through some expert topics. And the topic today is to really talk a little bit more about market niches and what does that really mean. We've covered a couple of subjects already about markets in general, and then a little bit about niche markets and characteristics. And now we're really digging into some specifics. So this is the one to watch carefully if you're trying to fix your market, if you're trying to create a better market, you're looking for new products or downsize your market so that you can increase your saturation or your market uh, uh, your market penetration with a current set of products or your whole business. So we've called it this niche marketing niche market characteristics, and this is the third one. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll through this right now, and we'll come back to our panel. Okay, basically, if you think about a market in terms of large to small, you start with a general industry. In other words, you're in the auto market. Then you kind of look at, well, are we just in the United States or are we worldwide, which not very many of those of you listening today are going to be interested in the worldwide auto market, but that's just an illustration to show how vast a general industry can be. And then you look at specialization. We'll have some specific auto examples as we kind of go through here. Then we get into specification and stickiness, and this is the phase where you develop a moat. We talked about building a moat strategy, Warren Buffett moat kind of thing, in the last one or two of these videos. So you can go back and look at that if you're uncertain about moats. And then distribution control is something that I've been working on with this concept for many years. Distribution control is something that kind of came later because I discovered that there were those people who controlled their distribution and therefore controlled their market. A distribution control example might be say, an avocado client that I had years ago that controlled its market because they had growers that were loyal to them, and therefore they owned the supply of the avocados. And then, of course, they sold them to markets. Because they controlled the supply, they were able to keep their competitors away because they couldn't get enough supply to compete. And then finally, we've got the referral and symbiotic. The referral is something where you're utilizing one part of your business to feed another part of your business, or an opportunity to work with someone very, very closely where, say it's a plumbing supply company that ends up doing business with a plumber. The plumber has its own market, and the plumbing supply company has a group of people through very close relationships, really, continue to do business with them. And so we'll kind of move on from there, and I'll explain some of these in a little bit more detail. In this particular this is representing a whole market, and you can see that we'll start with the outside first. In the outside, you've got an industry overall. Then on the outside, you've got geographic. So you come in one, and then you are in specialization, where you're doing something so special, there are very few, or there are fewer people competing with you. Then you go in another one. You get into this specifications, stickiness, symbiotic relationships and referrals. And so you come in yet another one. And so you can see this market, you started off with a market and it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And and then you run into this interesting one called authenticity. That's a kind of a plus for some people. It works in certain industries better than it does in other industries, but consumerism over the last 10 or 15 years has really shown that with all of the internet, and especially now with AI, where this is going to grow, that authenticity is a big deal. If you are going to buy a Gucci bag for your wife, she wants to know it's authentic.
Mm.
She doesn't want a knockoff that you got on the corner. And so that authenticity is important. Branding comes into that in a big way. And we'll be talking about branding and authenticity specifically in another series here. But basically, you've got to be able to convince your customer that you are authentic. Sometimes that's as simple as we're the original ones. We are the ones that developed it. John Deere will always be famous for developing the very, very first steel self-cleaning plow, which
Mm.
not only became dominant in the United States in the 1830s, 40s, but they managed to develop a reputation worldwide. And of course, Deere is a worldwide company, and all kinds of farm implements today started off of one simple thing. And it worked over and over and over again. It beat the competition. He got some patents for protection, but that authenticity helped grow that company into the behemoth that it is. And finally, we get all the way down to this little spot, and you've got a relationship. We talked about markets and relationship last time. You have a relationship with your lawyer, your CPA. You don't have a relationship with your grocer where you buy your bubble gum. You know, the gum, if you got a habit of a certain bubble gum kind, and you have to have a certain kind of bubble gum, the relationship is with it. It's not with the store where you bought it. So that's kind of what that is. When you get down to something this small and you have managed to create niches in, each one of these, narrowing your market, narrowing your market, narrowing your market, you've really got something that is effectively very similar, if not a mode itself. Um, So as we take a look at this, we can kind of watch it go a little bit, um, and hopefully this will make it even clearer as we move through the different ones by talking a little bit about a specific situation. Now, this situation happens to be years and years ago. I had a boss who loved uh, XKEs, well, Jaguars, loved Jaguars, and in order to get it repaired, he had to take it to someone who knew how to do that. And because he was a real stickler, and because Jaguar still isn't very dependable, it was less dependable a couple decades ago. You had to have somebody, if you could find him, somebody who maybe specialized in Jaguars. And it was a very frequent repair, as much as every month, every 2 months. And so that general industry here is the automobile industry. The geographic area was Los Angeles. So it's kind of a Southern California thing. You've got to be close enough to get your car to the repair guy. So he's not going to do very much business across the country, probably a little bit of business in San Francisco, but the vast majority of it is going to come from where the market is, which is going to be closer and closer to LA, San Diego. That's the metro area that really became the specialization. So he has eliminated a huge number of people who used to call themselves foreign car repair shops. So now he is a Jaguar foreign car repair shop, and you can see his market has gotten smaller. Then specification and stickiness. Well, an XKE um, uh, is something that is specific to the particular model and year of that car. And so he getting parts is difficult and is necessary, as I mentioned, on a frequent basis. So he kept several XKEs uh, for parts alone. So he tried to control the parts business. That gave him even more stickiness. But my boss, who got his thrill out of owning the Jaguar, the XKE, realized that he was not going to be able to drive it when it was in Los Angeles. He's 60 miles away. So he bought another one. So he now had two of them, one for the shop and one for his garage. So he became a specialist in a certain car because he loved the car and he loved his service company. So, in that regard, he didn't scavenge his own for parts, but he was able to have his guy scavenge for him whenever he needed parts. And of course, one car was 3 years younger than the other car, et cetera. So then you go down this other level, dealers and car clubs and other owners. So you end up with this referral because the XKE guys kind of get together. Sometimes they go to car shows. Sometimes they actually have clubs, and that becomes his referral base. Why? Because he's the only guy that does this specialty. And there may be other people who will work on a Jag, but they're not people who only work on Jags, because he was the only one at the time. And of course, that feeds your marketplace, but it makes your market a little bit smaller. Authenticity. Well, there's no doubt if you've got a Jaguar, you're not going to have a fake one around. So you know that the Jaguar is authentic. And when you go to this service guy, there's no doubt about what he's doing. He only has Jaguars, on his lot or in his garage. And he's got a bunch of XKEs like yours. And there's just no doubt about him being authentic because he knows what he's doing. He has repeat business. It's like, you're good. And finally, the relationship, which gets you down to the smallest niche possible. Because this is so special, the owner of the shop, now he has several other people, but the owner of the shop knows the owners or his customers personally. Why? Because they're going to be doing business for 10 or 20 years together. And he's authentic and he's trusted to do the best job that is possible. And so, he was able to keep one Jaguar running all the time. Now, there were a few times when both Jags were in the shop, and so he did have to buy for his wife. If his wife's was in the shop, so he had to buy a Honda so she had something to drive. But he took his Honda someplace else. And so you have this interesting narrowing of the market at each place. So just to review very quickly, if we take a look at this again, first you've got the industry, which is represented by the circle. Then you've got a geographic niche, which is represented by California here, and finally Southern California. Distribution control, well, he had some control over the junk cars in Southern California, not completely, but he had decent control. So he was able to narrow his niche again. And then, of course, we talked about authenticity. You have the relationship, and ultimately you get all the way down to this little teeny marketplace, which made customers happy. And it certainly made this particular repair guy very successful. He loved working in this area, and his customers loved bringing their cars to him. And so that's kind of a brief look at the characteristics. And we talk about, we say how to fail without even knowing it. Well, a lot of people spread their markets out wide, not intending for them to be wide. And they think that they're just adding more business. But the problem is they're also narrowing their scope. Instead of getting more of the XKE business, the Jaguar business, they're expanding geographically, making it harder and harder and harder to gain customers because you're further away, and harder to deal with them, especially if you're doing a pickup service or towing service or anything like that. And so the wider geography that you go, the less important you are to the ones that are there. The more the different cars that you begin to add. You say, oh, we do anything. Well, you've now opened yourself up to a big market, but you've also opened yourself up to unlimited competition. So the point, of course, to this whole discussion is to say that uh, if you can develop a really good, strong niche market, and if you can be number one or two in that marketplace, that the mathematically we know that your rewards are going to be higher based on the PIMS principles, which we covered a couple times ago, are going to be higher than if you're just in a general market. So there's the presentation on niche markets, and that kind of completes the information that I have. But I think the fun part will come now as we have a little discussion about markets. So we've got the old standbys. We've got Ray Anderson, who's been around for a long time and worked with manufacturers, frontline people, and managers, and trying to get them together to be able to improve production primarily. But he's worked with other, not just manufacturers. He worked with a lot of other kind of companies as well. Ed Lasik is a CPA, but he's also spent most of his career as a COO running sizable companies. And he also does consulting with small businesses. And John Mills is another one of those small business guys who came up with an idea to build a business, and it happened to be in electronics in the 90s, right? In the 90s,
80s.
in the 80s in the Midwest, and very successful there. Built a nice company in the electronics business where he had national, international clients and developed specific small products for them to solve problems. So we've got a group of people here that really has a wide swath of experience in small business. So let's talk a little bit about niches. John, how
Ron, I got a
much do you
question
like?
just on
Yeah,
that niche to take it one other segment.
sure.
So I live in a little small town and I like to have a particular flavor or style of product, but there are two stores that have that available to me. One of them, which is a supermarket type place that you just go and pick it off, and the other one is a very customer oriented, friendly home market type place, and I prefer to go there. Is that a variation of that niche? Because now I really just want to go to this one place, or is
Well,
that not?
yeah, which one did you choose? The one where they know you or the
Yeah,
one?
the one where they know me. Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, you see, they've gotten down to that relationship level. And we've talked about this briefly, but a relationship is something that is probably the most valuable part of the niche. Because when you have your own customers who are devoted to you, it is almost impossible to have somebody peel them off. And so that's the best that you can possibly do is to have a relationship with your customers. In my consulting business, and of course Ray has experienced this too, I didn't ever have a problem with another consultant coming in and saying, I can beat Ron. I can do a better job than Ron. Or Ron's stupid, or whatever they might have said, because my relationships had developed for such a long period of time. There was no opportunity for anybody else to come in. The average time I worked with clients was 12 years.
Yeah.
After 3 or 4 years, I mean, who's going to pop in the front door and say, "Oh, by the way, this wrong guy doesn't know anything about what he's doing"? And they're going, "Yeah, but our business is up 40%. What are you going to do?" So, so that's the ultimate right there, that relationship. But you point out something else too, and that is that it doesn't mean you're exclusive. Now, with your customers, perhaps, doesn't mean you won't peel off and occasionally buy this product from the other company. And therefore, you've got two companies with a number one and a number two position in the market, and they're going to have better margins. They're going to grow faster. They're going to recover faster when there's a downturn. And all of those PIMS kind of things that happen when you're number one or two in the marketplace are really evident in that particular case. So even if you've got a competitor, it's still a good place to be. Yeah.
Well, I would add a couple points to it. The closer you are to the center, the more selective you can be on who your customers are.
Hmm.
You don't have to accept everyone.
Right.
And
Good point.
some customers are great and some are not so great. So you can make that selection. And then also the closer you are to the center, the greater your profit margins can be because there's nowhere else to go.
That's
And
right. That's right.
so
You're
in your example, it's a dream situation to be that type of a provider that is an expert, highly recommended by others, that specializes in just Jaguars and can take care of all your needs. I mean, that really is a wonderful market to be able to service.
Yes. And so the quest in a way, yeah, you got to make money and you have to have accounting and you have to, maybe hire people and you got to do all these other things. But the goal is to get a customer, and the better goal is to get a customer in this niche because
Mhm.
that's where everything happens and that begins to be, it's good stuff for your business to be able to do that. It's been a hard it's been hard to get people to realize that this is the case, but I just see it over and over and over again, and have had to correct clients, new clients sometimes to convince them they needed to give up a piece of a market in order to pay attention to their primary market. It's easy for people to go astray on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes my viewpoints changed significantly over my career. At the beginning, it was all based upon getting a customer at any cost, uh, just to get a customer.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you felt like you're winning, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you feel like you're winning, and then you're growing, but the cost associated with that situation isn't always best for the company that you're trying to grow.
That's correct. Yeah, that is right. It's hard to just kind of accept this on faith, at first when you first hear this. But there are quite a few examples. One of them that I've used here before was a pest control company that was centered in Riverside, California. And that's a big city, 100 and what 80,000 people or something. And he kind of what did well, and he had 15, 20 employees. So I mean, it was a nice business. And as he began to get to the point to where he was ready to retire, he thought, well, the thing he needs to do is he needs to really grow this thing so he can get more money for retirement. And so he's got a hot shot salesperson who lived up in Big Bear. Now that's what 30 some miles up a mountain from Riverside. And this guy occasionally would just work Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, and the area crest line, work that area because he didn't have to drive down. And so he developed all this business up there, which was great for the salesperson. But now all these service people have to drive up there in order to be able to, do the business and to do the service. And so he's got these, two clusters of customers. And so he naturally thought, well, I'm going to fill in between. And so he goes to San Bernardino and Redlands and Colden. Anything in between now is okay. And somewhere along the line, he got one pretty big client way out past Fontana. I mean, I'm talking another 20, 30 miles straight west. Well, now he's driving all over the place, but his expenses have gone up. His cost to service this diverse group, geographic population began chewing him up. And so he grows 20, 30%, and he didn't make a dime more money. He just gave it away to transportation and gasoline and time. And so I'm trying to say to him, you got to change some of this stuff. And he's going, well, how do you know? Well, I had a list of all of the addresses of his customers and I mapped them out. So I showed him the clusters as to where he was and how many miles he was driving. He had no idea, no idea it was so bad. Then I find out that 90% of his business out to the west was one client that had an apartment building. One. He wasn't doing a lot of business. This was a commercial type operation, not a residential operation. There's a significant difference in marketing for those two markets. So I was starting to make some progress, but ultimately it didn't work out that we were going to work long term together because the sales guy up in Big Bear had more authority, more, he was more authentic, I guess, than I was at the time, because he convinced them that, oh no, we've got to continue to do this and grow. And he was a guy that was an older guy like us, done it the same way for a long time, was not interested in changing. And who is this? I mean, I was younger in those days, but who is this young whippersnapper coming in to tell me what to do? So that happens. That happens, and people don't do it. So I ran into one of these sales guys that I got to know 3 or 4 years later, and I said, well, "How's things going?" His wife, who's the bookkeeper, had agreed with me all along, but I'm sending her bills. She doesn't like that. Her expenses are going up, and now you got to pay for lawn. So that pressure, even though she agreed with the ideology, she had the problem with her husband spending money and not taking the advice. Like, it was part of it. Ultimately, 3 years later, they had shrunk back just a little bit, and to solve the problem, they had stretched their geography further and just spread them out. So, I mean, they're going nowhere. I don't think he ever sold his business. If he did, it was at a big discount, because the only people who want to buy something like that are people bigger than him, right, Ed? And not only are they bigger, they have to have a distribution that fits with this distribution in order to make it as efficient as possible. Well, there might have been three others. I don't know. Pretty small market to try and go sell your business. So it's not a great circumstance. Then on the other hand, to
Ron, it's funny
oh,
that,
go ahead, Ray.
yeah, I was going to say it's funny you should mention that he didn't sell his business, but the truth is, those of us who are single entrepreneurs, 80% of us just close the doors
Yeah,
because the business isn't worth enough to be able to sell it, and nobody's going to pay $40,000 a year or 60 or whatever for a business that only makes 40 to 60,000. So
that's
it's
right.
it's really it's quite a challenge.
Yeah, it really is. So contrast that with my plumber, who happens to be here today. And he did some work for me at a rental yesterday, and we had this conversation. And he's quite busy, yet he's still able to be on time, and he's just really, really good. He's gives me a good fair break every single time. He's absolutely trustworthy. So he's truthful, totally authentic. And I was just saying, he knows that I've had a life of in small business, and I was just asking, how's business? He said, oh my gosh, and we're so busy. I said, really? I mean, that's wonderful. I said, this is a good time to raise your prices. And he goes, no, I don't really want to raise my prices. He says, I'm making a nice living. I don't need to raise my prices. And I said, well, maybe you need to put some away, have a little bit better retirement. He says, oh no, I'm going to do that. I do it. I'm going to do that. But I just feel so good about giving people a good deal. I just
Hmm.
like that. And I said, well, now tell me about where you go. And he said, oh, when I started out, I used to go anywhere. I would go to Los Angeles but it wore me out. And so now, basically, I just do business here in town. I said, so you're able to make a living here in town? He said, yeah, yeah. So what I do is that he has one helper, it's just the two of them. He said, we'll take a larger construction project and do 2 days max. And then the rest of the time, 3 days, we do service work, for people like you and individuals. And and it's working out pretty good, because what I found is that I want to train somebody, and you can't train them in commercial because they do the same thing over and over. You got to train them to do service work at a home where you're faced with everything under the sun. And
Hmm.
then you can bring them along, and the ones who are sharp enough will be able to do something without you. And in fact, this guy has come out and done some work without him. But and then talking about then the market niche, he has with just based on logic, he has made his market smaller and smaller and smaller, and he's gotten rid of the commercial people who want too much time. And he's just kind of backed off of anything that didn't work. And he's so good that he's been able to maintain. And because he has this niche through these relationships, he's been able to maintain his business and do really well.
Hmm.
And so, there's an example of a very small business that follows this, whether it was planned or you're just commonsensical enough to be able to do it on your own. It really works. And he can make money because he's not spending so much money on gas. And he clusters them, he'll come and see me. And now, so as a result, because of the relationship, I plan projects that are not time sensitive so he can work them in whenever he wants. Because I know that if he's got extra side work to do in 3 days, two weeks, whatever, that he's going to not raise the price on me because I'm not demanding that I get something fixed immediately. I'm purposefully giving him work that will make him prosperous and fit in with his time schedules. So that's what also happens on the other side with relationships when you finally get down to that is you've got cooperative customers, and the customer gets a better value, and the company can make some more money.
You bring up another good point, and that is the closer you are to the middle of the circle, actually your enjoyment of doing what you're doing increases
Mm,
significantly.
good point.
And if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, why do it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
what's the point?
And when you expand that circle, you pick up all kinds of headaches that you
yes,
really don't want to have to deal with. You're getting calls over the weekend, after hours.
yeah.
This doesn't work, that doesn't work. That just diminishes your excitement for the business.
You're right, Ed, and he actually said exactly that. He said, now, for someone like you, if you don't have any hot water on a Sunday, I'll come out and we'll get you fixed up. But for the most part, I don't work Saturdays and Sundays.
Right.
I don't need to do that because, we've done a reasonably good job scheduling people and that kind of stuff. And, I'm not taking more customers who would cause me not to be able to take care of my current customers. So, you know, it's like it's the best of both worlds. I've got to spend some time with my family, and I've got to keep myself reasonably stress-free. I know I'm going to get older, and there'll be a day when I can't get, prone on the floor anymore, or
Mm.
get up into the attic like I had him do this morning. Both of those things,
Yeah.
So, and that's what.
No, and the other thing that we know, those types of service industries, carpenters, plumbers, etc., AI is not going to take their jobs.
No, it's not. No, it is not. If anything, there are going to be complete systems that will really help them with their servicing and their accounting and even hiring, and they'll be able to do what they do and enjoy it more because really, as we all know, very few of these small business people get into business because they want to do accounting. Ed, maybe you might be the exception, Ed. But I think you like the
Well,
strategy
he likes
way more
accounting,
than you do the accounting.
and that's why I've
I
always
that's
wondered about
true.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you're here, Ed. If all you like to do is accounting, you wouldn't even
Well,
be.
I turned down a really big customer client because of that same fact. All that client wanted me to do is all these little projects and do this, you do that, you do this. She told me what to do. With my
Yeah.
expertise, I would get them accomplished. It's too much like being on the clock, and it's not what I enjoy doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I just said, I'm not interested. Go find
yeah,
somebody else.
yeah, right. And there are a lot of people who can do that. There are not very many people who can do what you do. Yeah, you have a definite specialty that is way beyond the CPA at the end of your name there. Yeah.
So picking what you want to do is extremely important to this analysis of a niche market. You
Hmm.
have to have a market, but you also have to have the skill set and the desire to participate in that market.
Yeah. You've got to be prepared. In order to be good and satisfy people, you need to know your business. The guy that I mentioned, the plumber, I mean, he spent 15 years learning from a very accomplished plumbing company and then getting all of his certifications before he even started his company. That, he might not take 15 years, but you got to spend the time in order to understand the industry so that you can truly, you're on your own. You want to have resources, of course, and knowledge bases and people you trust, but you've got to be able to handle the majority of these problems by yourself. So it takes smart people who know what they're doing in order to be able to accomplish this. But you end up with a very satisfying business on a day-to-day basis and over the long haul. You've developed something that very, very few people have been able to do, and that is a business that gives you some time, a nice living, and has developed a retirement for you. I mean, that is the top, what, 95% of the
Right.
businesses that we've dealt with. So, and paying attention to your niche market is one of the main important pieces to that. So, any of you have any closing thoughts?
Well, I had a thought for you. I can't remember who it was that, said that in order for you to become an expert, you have to have at least 10,000 hours in a business.
Yeah.
Do you guys agree with that, or do you think there are ways to shortcut that into that inner circle of customer service and loyalty?
It's an innate relationship that you have with understanding the client and the situation. And the 10,000 hours is, it depends on person to person, I would suspect. But I think a lot of people can do it with less than 10,000 hours. Some people take more than 10,000 hours. But it's those nuanced understandings of expectations and unintended consequences. Um, because those of us who've worked with clients who are very relaxed, they're not necessarily always relaxed. They need an outcome. They don't want you to be all happy and friendly and go, well, you know what, it's Friday night, but I can't get your garage door to go up and down. I'll be back Monday. Well, and all of a sudden their relaxed attitude changes.
Yeah.
Because there is an understanding that we know when we engage with a client, there's an expectation we're going to walk with them. We're going to be unified with them to some extent in their expectation. The problem is it's their expectation, not ours. So,
Mhm.
how do we understand that? Well, those of us who experienced 99% of the time get it right. Every once in a while, we don't get it right. And the expectation they have is unreasonable.
Mhm.
And therefore, we look like we're lying to them. So
Yeah.
so to answer your question, yeah, I think you can do it if you've got highly attuned emotional and social skills, and you understand also how to plan your time and events. But most of us have to do it for a while.
Yeah.
Right, right. And the other thing, to piggyback on that, John, I think when, as Ron pointed out, you're in the center of that circle, you got relationships. You can make a mistake. Now you can't make a series of them, but a good customer relationship understands, yeah, okay, we got it. Just let's make sure that doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
You're right. Right? That's when you've got that trust, and it comes
Hmm.
back to trust and
Hmm.
relationship. I mean, um, I had a situation with some eyeglasses that I went in, and it was with a large retailer, and they didn't work. So I had it taken back. It didn't work again on the rework. I
Mm.
waited 6 months and finally went to a different optometrist who
Mhm.
said, hey, the problem is they've kind of messed up a couple of these things before you gave the prescription. Went
Right.
back to the guys who fabricate the glasses. And I said, look, I've sat on this for a while. 6 months have gone by, and and they looked at it and says, no problem. We'll refund you everything,
Hmm.
Wow.
and redid
Well,
it. And it's like, wow, that was
that's
not
good.
really my expectation.
Yeah,
Because part of it is my problem. My eyes are getting a little less accurate than they were, and so therefore it's a little harder to fit. But it's also they just said, no, this is what we do. And
yeah,
so now I'm like, wow, this is good.
yeah.
Right, right. And
I,
you
I
won't be
should
going anyplace else soon.
Well, I'm going to go to an optometrist to get my evaluation
Yeah.
better, but you
Yeah.
know, these guys are nationwide, Costco, and they did a wonderful job on the actual
Yeah.
fabrication. Well,
Yeah.
they
Right.
didn't do a wonderful job the first time, I guess, but they corrected it.
Well, right. They have deep pockets and they're customer oriented and they're gonna fix it because they know you're gonna spend 1,000 times more in their store than on those glasses. So, but if you went to an optical store, it might have even been a chain, they may not have been willing to do that because they don't have you as a valued member customer. So it kind of depends. But it
So there
also
is a
sort of,
relationship. There's a
yeah,
relationship of trust,
but
and of course, their expectation is that I'll continue to come back.
yeah.
And
Right.
I didn't ask them to replace them. I just said, "What can you do?"
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they said, "Oh,
And
we'll take care of that for you."
yeah. And you also, but I think it this kind of goes to Ray's question, I think, and comment, and that is that they hire a lot of optometrists to do the prescription that are unskilled because they've only done it for 3 years. They went through optometric school and they're new and they're trying to get their feet on the ground. You go to an independent optometrist, he's a proven commodity because he's done it for 10, 20 years and he knows what he or she, what they're doing. So, you go to a place like Costco to do something professional, you never really want to rely completely on the prescription being correct because they're just not as good. And I think it shows both points. On one side, they can outservice and outprice any smaller guy, especially the optometrist who gets twice as much money for a pair of glasses. Um, but you give up a little bit of service. It's just that the very few people are sophisticated enough to know the difference. My father happens to be an optometrist. That's the only reason I can tell the difference. It's because I do know a lot about that. But um, yeah, good points. I would comment that you don't have to have 10,000 hours if you've decided you're going to specialize in dominoes and you're going to sell them online. You spend the time in the research, you figure out how to pick the products you're going to sell, um, and you probably don't need that. But I do think that a lot of time it does require that, especially the crafts, all the certifications stuff, the people. I know, and I can remember the day when I finally felt like it was okay for me to put business advisor, consultant kind of sign on the wall, throw out the shingle. I had spent 20 years preparing for that before I started. It took 20 years before I felt completely competent to be able to talk to almost any small business and help them through their issues. So yeah, what's that, 3 years or no, that's 5 years, 10,000 hours of 5 years. In
That's
my case, I might have been able to get business, but I didn't feel comfortable until I
this
had four
40,000
times as
hours.
much. Yeah.
this is
Oh,
my
I look forward
favorite
to it.
topic when it comes to filling new positions. They'll be looking for a CFO and they'll have all these requirements. We want 20 years of experience on this software.
Yeah.
It is such a worthless expectation
Mhm.
because you're looking at skills that are way beyond that requirement. And they limit the people they talk to based upon whether you have that experience or not. And
Yeah.
quite frankly, you could have much more prolific experience that could really help the company add value, but they don't know what they're looking for. So there's
Right.
too many times, so many times they put too much emphasis on past experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Of course, we had a lot of experiences, a lot of time to talk about um, the issues of hiring, and I think that it's really kind of true. In small business, it is interesting that let's say that somebody starts, but they're not quite competent. They've only got 5,000 hours, and they're not quite competent in that. The interesting thing about it is that if it's your business, customers will sort you out and you will not be in business anymore. You better solve the problems or you won't be in business. So we don't see that, but that 90% of them that don't make it 5, 10 years, part of it could be they were incompetent in their particular specialty. You do develop business if you're competent, like my plumber, as an example, and you have to be competent. And I think that and this is an interesting point, really, as we discuss it, a lot of our clients that we have, a lot of prospects, a lot of businesses go out of business because they're not competent in the core competencies that are expected of them. And there's a thing that I call market acceptance, which is sort of like the very first success measurement or hurdle. And that is that the market has to accept your products, your services as being competent or appropriate before they'll continue to spend money with you. That's number one. And then you get into other things like financial measures and, inventory turnover, all of those things we spend a lot of time talking about. But if that cash register doesn't ring once and then it doesn't ring it twice by the same customer, you have not been market accepted and you will not be successful. And this is an interesting question. I don't think I've ever thought about it this way. If you don't have those return customers, perhaps it's because they don't have the expertise in their industry. And I don't know, have you ever run into small business experts that have had the conversation about, well, your failure was because you didn't know anything about your business? I mean, and I'm not talking about the measurement of business and things that we do a lot of, but I'm talking about you didn't know your core business, your core product, your core services. You just didn't know it. And that's kind of hard for us as consultants to evaluate because we don't know every industry where we're working.
Well, that's why 90% of businesses fail.
Yeah. And
They
I'm
get
just
into
wondering.
business thinking they know more than they really do.
Yeah. And I'm wondering
They
if
can't
this
service
isn't
their
really a
customers.
major percentage of that 90%. But I've never really thought about that.
Yeah.
So, well, that's really an epiphany, everybody. For me, anyway. And I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. And thank you very much. And for those of you who enjoy this or realize you need to understand some of these things a little bit better, be sure to subscribe so that you can know when we get these posted and you can continue to watch them as we roll them out. Thanks very much, you guys, and we will see you next week.
Thank you, Ron.
You bet.